Good evening, Dr. Liz and fellow classmates. From viewing the presentations, there was a number of things I noticed about the counseling skills that were shown. The first thing I noticed was the invitational attitude of the counselor. Uh, the question was asked, how can I help you today? Okay, so that was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was the listening of the counselor. Direct eye contact was being made, and the counselor was kind of sitting in an upright position, kind of a position of attention, to let the client know that they were interested in what he or she was saying. The third thing I noticed was the appropriate nonverbal communication that the counselor shared with the clients. At times when the client may have had a smile on his or her face, uh, the counselor also would kind of give a smile. At times where the client was a little bit more serious or somber, the counselor at that time would have a more serious expression on his or her face. I noticed another thing that the counselor did to kind of get the client to open up more was to ask open-ended questions. And another thing I noticed in getting clarity of meaning, I noticed that the counselor would ask closed-end questions for a more definitive yes, no, or absolutely answer. Then I noticed also throughout the session, the counselors would do some paraphrasing just to kind of make sure that they were understanding what the client was feeling and what they meant. And thirdly, I noticed that the counselor would kind of, in wrapping things up, he or she would kind of summarize what was talked about in the session. So those were the things that I noticed during the counseling session. In terms of whether I imagined it being the way it was or different, for the most part, I imagined it to be that way. However, there was one thing that I noticed that was different. I would normally think that the way I was thinking that in a session, the client would normally sit down and the counselor would be sitting behind the desk with a pen and a notepad, kind of jotting down things as the client was speaking. But in these presentations, I noticed that the counselor was sitting directly across from the client. So there was no obstruction there, which I think was a good idea. I thought, I always kind of imagined the counselor sitting behind a desk, but in this case, I thought that was a very good way, kind of to make the client feel more at ease and also make the client feel that he or she was getting the undivided attention from the counselor with no obstruction. So those are the things that I noticed about the presentations. Thank you very much and have a good evening.